Would like to call this to order, and if we could all rise for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag
of the United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, and justice for all.
and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Fryrick,
Here.
Mr. Posnell,
Here.
Mr. Robinson,
Here.
Mr. Sanders,
Here.
Mr. Scalette,
Here.
Mrs. Schrader,
Here.
Mr. Sears,
He's
Here.
here.
Mr. Sullivan,
Here,
Mr. Tillman. 8 members present.
Reminder to please keep yourself muted unless speaking. And this is the first opportunity for public comment. If we could. Okay, everybody had time to see it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. We have a link here to the minutes of the Reorganization and Planning Committee meetings of December 7th. Unless there are corrections, I would submit them to be approved as submitted. I think that's a yes. Mr. Sears, Treasurer's Report.
Rather short this evening. I'd like to start by letting you know that the estimated interest for November is $33,180, which is up slightly from last month by a couple thousand. We have a consent agenda. Would any board member like any of the items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of the items? If not, the chair moves approval of the below mentioned items.
Do I have a second?
Oh, second. Ellen.
Questions or comments? This can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Okay, thank you. The board met in executive session in virtual meeting format prior to this meeting as permitted by Section 707 of the Sunshine Act for the purpose of discussing matters of negotiation. No official action was taken. Dr. Williams.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight we have, I didn't notice if Mac was in the gallery there.
I saw it. He's on. Mac's on.
Great. We have Mac Brillhart from the Education Foundation, who's here to give annual report to the board. I'll turn it over to Mac.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Can everyone hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Thank you for allowing me to participate. I'll try to be brief. Just a quick summary. Our mission statement continues to provide funding for innovative programs to enhance the educational experience and academic excellence for district students. You may have noticed that YSEF more than ever has not gotten away from the academic side of things, but increased its presence socially for students with assistance with things like food and household belongings. So we are revisiting our mission statement to try to incorporate the breadth of what we do. This past year, we've done two major concepts we participated in: continuing to fund grants for students, administrators, and teachers within the district, as well as organizing and advising the Impact Foundation, which is a 45-member student-led committee of YSEF. As far as granting, this past year we granted 14 grants, totaling over $41,000, again, to students, teachers, and administrators within the district. A few quick examples. We granted a Mimic Personal Finance Simulation Program, which is a year-long license teaching personal finance skills to high school students. We also granted to Dr. Stoltz and Monis books to exemplify diversity within characters in those books, as well as the authors and illustrators creating the books. These books were read to promote inclusion in the community, to help all students see themselves within the pages of the books. We are currently accepting grant applications for 2021 and 2022 on our website, ysef.org. And those applications are open until February 1st of 2021. As to the Impact Foundation, beginning in March, we saw a need within the community due to the pandemic and changes in families' financial situations. We transitioned our weekend food backpack program called Food for Thought into a choice food pantry. From March through mid-October, the Impact Foundation provided food and household goods to over 425 families, distributing 30 pounds of food to each family during each weekly visit. We continue to average between 20 and 25 families per week, utilizing our online ordering system for perishable and non-perishable food items, along with basic hygiene essentials. We appreciate the weekly donations and support of our friends in the district through our Amazon wish list and the Facebook weekly whiteboard. We also recently completed training through the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank to meet all requirements to obtain a Serve Safe Pantry certification. More recently, we received a $12,000 grant through the State Department of Environmental Protection to purchase a dual commercial grade refrigerator and freezer unit to increase our operational efficiencies. As to our closets, all 6 district buildings continue to house an impact closet where teachers, guidance counselors, and nurses can access clothing, hygiene supplies, and snacks to provide basic supplies to students. Beginning in October, the Impact Foundation opened a district closet beside the Choice Food Pantry at Luther Memorial beside the high school. Having the district closet centralized in one place assists if any of the buildings have to close due to COVID. We also found it beneficial for parents and caregivers to shop with their children to help try on clothing. And furthermore, parents and caregivers are able to select clothing and necessities for their entire family, toddler to adult. We also held our back to school supply backpack distribution for students. We distributed 344 backpacks with items needed for specific grades. In 2018, we distributed 27 backpacks. In 2019, 110 backpacks, and most recently, 344 backpacks. We also finished working with the administration at York Suburban for their annual Give a Meal distribution. We had a coat, hat, glove distribution, along with food items to supplement boxes. There were toys and household goods available for families to select. Finally, children received a candy cane, a cup of hot chocolate, and their own box of crayons to color on coloring pages while their parents shopped. We solicit donations one of 3 ways: our fall campaign, the spring event, and we now are a participant in Give Local York. Lastly, as to our spring event, as is the case for virtually everything, it will look different this year. We will be holding a walk for YSEF instead of our traditional events at Heritage Hills or Windridge Farm. The new event will allow people to social distance while supporting YSEF and bring awareness to our mission. Individuals will be able to purchase tickets for an April event. And if anyone has any questions or wishes to view additional information, they can do so at www.ysef.org, as well as our Facebook page, York Suburban Education Foundation. And I think I've met my 2 goals, which was to get done in 5 minutes or less and have none of my children interrupt my presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Brillhart. Any questions for Mac? All right, thank you. And as a little follow-up to that, next month at the January 11th meeting, you heard Mr. Brillhart mention the Impact Foundation and the closets. Our social worker, Miranda King, will be giving a presentation on the 11th of January about what she does, and she gets some assistance from the Education Foundation and Impact Foundation for the work that she tries to get done for our students. So thank you, Mr. Brillhart. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
If I could just add the board's thanks for all the foundation does, your board, your volunteers, no matter the need, you guys step up and serve the community. And as a board, we appreciate it very much. Thank you.
All right. And now we'll move on to Superintendent's Report. Friday was the last student day before winter break. Our COVID-19 numbers have been relatively light to this point. We've had some situations here and there, but by and large, they've been relatively light. We only had a few brief building closures due to positive cases and one closure that was due to staffing. When classrooms open again on January 4th, 2021, our 14-day rolling windows will begin again at 0 as per the Pennsylvania Department of Health. I'd like to thank everyone for their adherence to our health and safety plan. This has allowed us to offer in-person instruction with only minor interruptions. I would also like to wish everyone a peaceful and restful winter break. I hope everyone returns well rested and healthy for 2021. There are a few items I'd like to go over tonight as well. Prior to the pandemic, we began the initial conversations about the future of our facilities, many of which have served the district well without major renovations or changes for decades. We began discussing the future of our facilities for more than a year before the pandemic forced us to shift priorities. Those conversations that began in February of 2019 and came to an abrupt halt in March of 2020. The documents and information related to those 13 months can be found on our facilities page on our website. They're listed there in chronological order. Even though COVID and instructional options consume much of our resources these days, we do need to restart the facilities conversations again. The long-term sustainability of the district requires us to map out a plan for both the instructional and fiscal success. If we do not begin to move on this, we will jeopardize long-term sustainability of the district. To start that process, again, I just want to remind everybody that we had some enrollment projections, 3 projections, one done by a professional demographer, Sundance Associates, another set of projections done by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and then we did our own internal projections as well. Wendy, if you wouldn't mind showing those 2 tables about the projection comparisons. You can see in the first table there, the projections that we did in our internal way. You can see K through 12, what we projected the numbers would be for this year, and you can see what they actually are for this year. You can see we didn't do so well, kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. 2nd grade's not too bad. 3rd grade's pretty good. 4th grade's spot on. 5th grade's pretty good. 6th grade's not bad. And you can see how it transitions out there through the grades. That's our projection. So with the exception of K and 1st, they're pretty good. And if you look at the second table, you can see Sundance's projections, a professional demographer, and you can see the actuals compared to their projections. And you can see they didn't do quite as well as what we had done there. So that's what we're looking at projections wise. Now, when you look at kindergarten and 1st grade, you got to ask yourself, how in the world did that happen? How can we be so fairly accurate other places, but so poorly done so poorly in those kindergarten and 1st grade estimations? And that's largely due to trying to anticipate what the kindergarten enrollment is going to be, because we have very little to go on for that. So we were just taking some educated guesses for that. You also have to wonder if COVID has impacted our kindergarten registration numbers this year. you have to ask yourself, well, did some parents hold their kindergartner back a year because they could, because of COVID? And it's a likely scenario, which could mean that our kindergarten numbers next year could be fairly high, relatively speaking. So, but we really won't know if this is an anomaly or a trend for a couple of years yet. We need 2 more years of data to see if we have a trend going there. So those are the enrollment projections and where we are right now. Then we have to look at current building capacities. The middle school and the high school already draw students from both sides of the district, which means that we already maximize our instructional and financial resources in grades 6 through 12. At the elementary level, though, we have 2 buildings that serve the western side of the district and 2 that serve the eastern side. The current regular education classrooms and the square footage of those classrooms differ among the elementary buildings. And Wendy, if you wouldn't mind throwing that table, there it is, their table there. You can see the number of regular education classrooms in each building and the square footage of those rooms in those buildings. So for example, you can see Valley View has 24 classrooms. Many are small as 736 square feet, which for a classroom is really relatively small. I think typically classrooms are typically about 900 to 990 square feet, typically. So you can see the sizes of the classrooms and the number of classrooms in each of the 4 elementary buildings. And then coupled with that, we currently are going to receive a mechanical study. We asked Barton Associates to inspect the mechanicals in each of our buildings to help us prepare for the future. Many of our systems are aging quickly and some of them are operating beyond their expected lifespans. Barton is in the process of finalizing its study and we should receive a draft of it in January. We expect to share that information publicly at February's Property and Finance Committee meeting and or at a board planning meeting. And also I'd like to mention too, Wendy, if you wouldn't mind putting up the start times for elementary that we're talking about these days. We've got a couple of issues to contend with for next school year. One of the benefits of this whole COVID situation is that teachers across grade levels have been collaborating really well to plan instruction and to plan instructional strategies. And so that is a benefit of what has happened to public education this year. And we'd like to be able to continue with that collaboration time built into the day. But we don't want to do it at the expense of instructional time. So we're trying to figure out a way to make that happen. In addition to that, we also have some construction, roadwork construction that we have to be careful of. PennDOT will be redoing Interstate 83 and it will impact the bridge at Market Street and will create some, let's just say, traffic issues next year. So what we need to do is figure out a way to maximize time between the elementary runs and between the secondary runs and the elementary runs so that we can minimize or eliminate late buses. So the time frame that's on your screen right there is a time frame we're considering for the upcoming school year. We basically shifted the elementary day a little bit and the secondary day a little bit. Didn't take away any instructional time and just shifted some of the teacher times and student times a little bit, all within contracted time and all within appropriate times for students. This will allow us to have collaboration time for our teachers, and it will also minimize and hopefully eliminate any kind of delayed busing due to the construction on I-83. So that's what we're looking at for next year. I wanted to give everybody a heads up at this point. We haven't finalized this yet, but this is where we are leaning for this coming school year. And the last item on the superintendent's report tonight is the student enrollment report, which is will be attached to the superintendent's report when I post it. Any questions about the superintendent's report?
Dr. Williams, if I could ask a question, this is Steve Sullivan. If I'm not mistaken, and I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot here, because I certainly wasn't witness to any of the bus route Tetris you guys had to play to try to come up with the solutions that are being suggested here. But there was a discussion around this time last year I think there was an article maybe from the Philly Inquirer that was circulated about the growing body of research that suggests that the high school students do better starting later in the day. And I just didn't know whether any consideration was given to that as a solution concept and it just couldn't be made to work, or because I know 20 minutes earlier is not a big difference, but it wasn't the direction I was expecting.
Right, and we did have that conversation because we believe the body of research. We just didn't think we could make that work this coming year with this traffic situation. We've not forgotten about that, and we're still very much interested in trying to figure out how best to make that happen.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Scott, Dr. Krause, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, Dr. Sullivan, just in reference to that, the actual entry time for students is only changing by 5 minutes. It appears to be 20 minutes, but remember there is an arrival time. So at the secondary, we open the buildings already now this year under the current COVID health and safety plan at 7:35. There's that what we call arrival time. So there's an open slot from 7:35. That first bell doesn't ring for the periods to begin until about 7:50. So it really only boils down to 5 minutes. And as Dr. Williams said, that's kind of the overlap of time where we were netting. Yes, absolutely. We did start the study last year to move start time, but this 5-minute buffer to potentially resolve larger constraints with the construction was the compromise there in the middle.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
So to piggyback on that, if I could ask, first period, or is it homeroom starts when? When do I have to be in my classroom if I'm a student?
It would be 5 minutes earlier than it would have been 2 years ago. Actually, this year with COVID, it's landing about there now because we're entering a staggered start time at the secondary level. Like, historically, the doors opened at 7:40 in the middle school. This year, we're allowing students in at 7:35. Teachers started at 7:35. So we're bringing the teachers in 5 minutes ahead of time so that they're there and on site. So when the students arrive, the teachers are already in the building. So net result for a student, they would be getting their first period or their homeroom class 5 minutes earlier than they had in the past.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, and tonight we have Dr. Gully and Dr. Snedden. I'll ask Dr. Gully to go first.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Williams. Hello, everyone. This evening, I have a special guest with me. I have Mrs. Caitlin Hall, who is our gifted support teacher. And our goal tonight, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Hall here in just a few minutes, is just to highlight one of our handful of extracurricular activities that we have at Indian Rock. And we have a chess club, a robotics club, and Biothon. We have miles in the morning. And we're limited at the elementary school as to what we can offer. And especially with COVID, we have been doing some virtual, and really we've had to cancel a lot of our different programs. The one thing I do want to share, the students, you're going to see a short video here with 3 students, very eager 5th graders that have been wanting to talk about our first LEGO League challenge for the last several months. So tonight we're just going to give you a snapshot, a highlight of one of the extracurriculars, which is called the First LEGO League. And some of you may or may not be familiar with it, but we've been having the program now for about 3 years. And what it is, it's an elementary and middle school program in grades 4 through 8. And every year in August, the LEGO League Challenge, the teams that we have, the one at Indian Rock was introduced to a scientific and a challenge for teams to focus and research on. And the robotics part of the competition involves designing and programming different LEGO Mindstorm robots, and they complete these different tasks. And again, the kids will tell you about this in just a little bit. But what they then do is they come up with a solution to the problem, and then they meet for regional tournaments to compete, to share their knowledge, to compare ideas, and also to display their robots. And also, Mr. Brillhart, when he was going over the YSEF grants earlier, we were actually a recipient to purchase additional robots so we can extend this into East York and hopefully when we get back to a traditional school year. So at this time, I am going to turn it over to Mrs. Hall. She's going to share some information about our first LEGO League club that we have at Indian Rock.
Brillhart, thank you so much for our YSEF grant this year that hopefully at the end of this school year or going into next year, we can really start to expand the program. Unfortunately, this year, like Dr. Gully said, we had to start canceling some of our extracurriculars, and our group this year is considered a community group, and they're running outside of the school at their homes and socially distancing, which much smaller amounts of students at this time. I still go and help out with their coding and everything, but I'll let the students share about what First LEGO League is about. It's not just about robots, but a lot about building their community and furthering their future. So I'm going to share.
Restart. We are trying to get kids to be active. One part of First LEGO League is research. Each year there's a problem, and you need to decide on a solution. You can make something new or improve an existing idea. This year, we need to find a way to get kids to go outside and play.
Sorry.
To move their bodies and our minds. We are planning a park with focus on older students because a lot of playgrounds aren't suitable for teens. We want to incorporate virtual aspects and create an app to go around the park and scan nature to learn or find different ways to be active. A main part of our research is contacting an expert, and right now, our research team is each contacting a different expert in the field. We had to split our team into two to social distance, so half are researching and half are working on the robot game. At the end of practice, we share what we're learning.
Another part of First LEGO League competition is the robot. First we build the robot and the board. Then as a team we look at all the missions. We only have 2 minutes to do as many missions as possible, so we have to choose the order wisely. Next we decide extensions to help with missions, then we had to make the code to complete the missions. This is not an easy task. We need to recode the robot a ton of times to get it just right. One wrong move and the robot will go crazy. This takes a lot of teamwork and patience.
First LEGO League is not just about building robots and researching problems. Part of the scoring process includes how well your team follows the 6 core values. The 6 core values are inclusion, discovery, teamwork, innovation, impact, and fun. At LEGO League, at practice, we would have team building activities such as first LEGO League mission, such as putting the first LEGO League mission statement in order, to do fun team building activities, and learn about each other. My favorite core value is impact because we get to impact our world, but our team's favorite is fun. These are important because they help us develop team skills which can be used throughout life.
So in a normal year, we would begin practicing in September, and we would meet weekly for about an hour and a half, and they would work in all these different areas of research, design, and building teamwork. Usually the teamwork is their favorite part because they get to play games together and learn about each other. And last year they really did become a family. This year, some of the students went off to middle school, and they actually wanted to be part of the team. And COVID actually allowed us to keep those team members since we couldn't start the application process and they became a community team. We now have about half of our team as 6th graders and half of the team as 5th graders this year. And First LEGO League is making ways to hopefully still have our competition. We keep pushing it back, and it's going to be virtual, and we'll be streaming in with our competition. This year, we always do a scrimmage at York Country Day, which is always a lot of fun because they get to try it out. And last year was their first year doing this, so they've been learning a lot. And we really hope that in the coming years that East York can get a team as well, and we can start expanding our teams and start practicing with some of the younger students to have them start learning those coding skills ahead of time. Because a lot of our year was spent last year just learning how to basically code a robot. And I know at the middle school, they have some of these EB3 robots, so hopefully it will lead them into diving deeper into their knowledge of technology when they get to Dr. Sneddon at the middle school, as long as those robots are still working. We unfortunately can only have 10 team members on a team at a time, so that does make it difficult to include a lot of students. Last year, Dr. Gully started clubs and Dr. Furman also has clubs, so I'm hoping to start using the robots within those club times so that other students can utilize the robots and start learning about them, and hopefully gain a better knowledge and maybe to start their own community teams with the robots. Mr. Brillhart did allow us to get some more robots this year, which was great because they are expensive. They're about $400 for a robot, and just being part of the First Lego League each year is around $300 as well. So students do have to pay to be part of the organization, which does make it difficult at times, but we had some great parents this year that allowed them to come and join, and they paid some of the students that may have not been able to afford everything that it was costing them. So I just want to share the wonderful students that we have. That was only a few of them with our team this year with social distancing. Does anyone have any questions about First Lego League? If not, thank you so much.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Dr. Gully. Thank you. Dr. Snedden.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to be able to present. My past couple times that I was due to present, I ended up getting canceled. So I was beginning to think that maybe it was something personal or something. I have just a few short things. I'm going to share my screen here with you just to showcase some of the happenings that we have had here at the middle school. So our first item this month, we had a couple special visitors this month from some of our favorite Christmas movies that were moved throughout the building. And so the students and the teachers got to pose with these. We compiled them all into a single video that we then shared with our entire students and staff. The interesting part about this, the teachers were actually able to nominate where the inflatables went next based on whether they felt somebody was naughty or nice. So we also got to do some staff recognition with this activity as well. Last week, we had our holiday spirit days. So each month, because we cannot do our typical middle school activities, we've been holding monthly spirit days. So this one was holiday attire. So there were plenty of ugly sweaters and ugly suits that came out. To talk a little bit academically, some of the adaptation and change that we've had to make. Your picture here with the two students working in the hallway. We have had situations where teachers have had to quarantine themselves. So they have been at home. So we've essentially flipped the way some of the instruction works in those classes. So there is a sub that's in the room, but our hardworking teachers are teaching from home. So here you have a situation where these students were actually working in a small group with a teacher who was at home. On the right-hand side here, we did have our first snow day incident, and trying to think about what does a snow day look like here in a COVID era. And one of the things that Ms. Bedell and I kept going back to is that joy of the excitement of a snow day and getting to experience that time of, sleeping in and that exciting news. But then also realizing that we already had such limited time in front of students to begin with. So we created a little bit of a hybrid blend between the two, where we were able to compile our day into a very brief morning time. And then would allow the students still the opportunity to get to experience all the joys that come with a snowfall like we just had. And the last thing I want to share with you is, as Mrs. Hall and Dr. Gully have shared with you, some of our extracurriculars, unfortunately, with the COVID restrictions, haven't been able to operate the same way as they have in the past. So we aren't running clubs the same way that we have. The same way our music program hasn't run the same way as it has. Our picture here is actually where we now do our chorus rehearsals. So you see them being held in the gymnasium with the kids all spaced 6 feet apart. And then just last week, we sent out all of our links to our various music concerts to our community for them to be able to view. So I wanted to play just a brief 30-second clip for you so that you can see what a band concert looks like during COVID. So I think that's really a great, you know, to our hardworking teachers and recognition of them thinking outside the box, but also to our families that have a student recording themselves playing an instrument in their kitchens and bedrooms and so on. So it does look different this year, but we are still keeping everything going at the middle school. So thank you. And, you know, whatever holiday you might be celebrating this year, I wish you a great holiday season.
Thank you, Dr. Snedden. Any questions for Dr. Snedden or Dr. Gully? All right. And that concludes the superintendent's report for this evening.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Chichuli, Business Office.
Good evening. I have several items for board consideration tonight. The first item is a behavior and special education services agreement that was discussed at the planning session for board approval for tonight.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, questions or comments? This can be a unanimous roll call vote.
Okay, this can be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. Item B is a similar contract or agreement, rather. It is with Learn Well. It is to provide educational services for an out-of-district placement for approximately 10 weeks at the cost of $46.50 per hour. May I have a motion, or are there any questions?
So moved, Ellen.
Thank you.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, question.
Mrs. Chichili, so this is for one student for 10 weeks. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is that out of count? Just curious, out at a distance or more local?
I would have to defer to Ms. Campbell or Dr. Krauser.
Just curious how much transportation is involved.
I'm kind of waiting for Ms. Campbell. I don't know if she's responding to that. I believe this doesn't involve transportation. I believe this might be a placement.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But I will defer to Ms. Campbell. We'll get a definitive answer for you.
But it's only a period of 10 weeks, which is like
Correct.
from now, has it begun or was beginning after the first of the year or something like that? I'm guessing.
Again, I'll get a confirmation on that.
It says December 12th. I'll take that back. December 12th. So I'm right, the middle one. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Krauser.
It is a student that is in placement.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I think this can also be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. Item C is to approve Regina Nywin as a bus driver or a van driver with Reliance Transportation.
So moved, Ellen.
Thank you.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? This can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. Item D is a service agreement with Sunbelt Staffing to provide substitute services. This service will primarily be used for substitute nurses, and the contract is not linked, but will be provided. One of the issues that we have been struggling with is with getting substitute nurses. And so we have 2 contracts, but still with those 2 contracts, we were not able to fill our vacancies. And Ms. Campbell worked previously with Sunbelt Staffing and has a great relationship with them and recommended this to the administration. And so that has been vetted out, and we're hoping to fill the vacancies that we have.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second, Ellen.
Questions or comments?
How much more does this cost us above the salary when we get a substitute from this service? Is it comparable to STS or something like that?
Well, it's comparable mostly to the marketplace. And so I believe Ms. Campbell shared that, my apologies, I should have had this ready. That ranges between.
We should be able to contract for a LPN about $30 to $35 an hour. And that seems like a lot until you realize that that is just a one-time fee. We're not paying anything into retirement or SSI or benefits. So when you look at that compared to a health room assistant, it does equal out. I think that Kathy and I, with the numbers, looked and found that a health room assistant, when you total everything, including benefits, comes out to about $36.50 an hour. So it's within that range that we're currently paying our health room assistants.
Okay, thank you.
Additionally, because we're filling vacancies with these substitutes, the money that we've budgeted and set aside for a full-time health room assistant that money is being used to cover the cost of the substitute.
Sure.
So essentially it should be a wash at the end.
Sure, thank you.
Other questions? This can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous vote call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. The last item for board consideration is, the motion is to deny the request to waive the 10% penalty fee for the 2020 tax period on the parcel that is shown before you. The information pertaining to this parcel has been provided to the board.
Okay. We have a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
discussion, questions, comments? Then this can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous vote call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. Okay, I have two items for informational purposes. The first one is the COVID expense, and Wendy, if you can bring up and just go straight to the second page. There have been no significant changes to the budget. As a matter of fact, there haven't been any. So that's what that first page is for. And the second page are expenses. And these are expenses actually through November 30th. So my apologies for the heading on the top. And the total expenditures to date, which include expenditures for 1920 and 2021, is $722,975. The previous month was $714,000, with an increased difference of $8,880. For total expenses for 2021 is about $462,000. So the changes where we've seen from previous months, from October 28th, which was the last time that I provided the board with an update, was in the PDEE grants, which there was a small, about $4,000 increase in expenses. But as you can see, that there is still a remaining balance from the funds that were to receive from the state. The PCCD grants were completely expended, so there's no more funding in that area, and we've expended all of that money. Costs beyond grants, there was a small increase in supplies, and then no change in custodial supplies and instructional supplies. There was a increase in custodial overtime, and that is about $10,000. I will also mention, and to keep in mind, that the amounts that you see on the costs beyond grants also includes encumbrances in the realm of custodial supplies. I will also add that there is a COVID York County grant that we applied for. It is about $50,000, or up to $50,000 can be awarded to the district. We submitted expenses that had already incurred of $73,000. So if we are granted up to $50,000, that will cover anything that we've expended in the cost beyond grants section. Are there any questions regarding COVID expenses? Okay, hearing none, I'll move on to the dining report. So you'll have the monthly dining review report from Winston's, and you can see some of our activities there. But if Wendy, you can pull up the sales report. If you recall that last month's review of food service, we talked about how in the last several months we've seen our expenses exceed revenues. And we talked about how since August we have seen a deficit or a loss in that fund. But you can see on the second page, so overall our deficit is down to 63,000. But you can see on the second page in the column for November that we had a small profit of $370. That was as a result of some changes and tweaks that we made to the food service program. One of the things that we did was to increase our participation by bringing breakfast meals to the classrooms instead of having students come to the cafeteria and selecting their meals. Another thing that we did as a way of increasing participation is that because of the meal waiver program, we are able to serve any child within our school district jurisdiction under the age of 18, and that includes preschoolers. So we have been serving meals there as well. Labor costs have come down a little bit, and that's because of vacant positions that continue to be vacant. At this time, we're not filling those. On the last page, you'll see our meal participation in comparison to prior year. So in November, you'll see that we've served 28,965 meals. Rather, 28,965 meals were accounted towards free. So if you recall, all of our students are counted as free because that's what the meal program under the USDA is currently. And you'll see as you go down what our breakfast breakout is and our lunch, as well as the breakdown by building. And so I'll just open the floor for any questions.
Kathy, tell me, you say that you're taking the breakfast and the lunches to the rooms, or just the breakfasts?
Just the breakfast, and this is just in the primary.
Okay, do the children have to take this, or if a child says, no, I ate breakfast, they don't have to?
And if they don't, it stays in the classroom as a snack for during the day. Students have the choice to take, a fruit or something home if they'd like. Whatever is left over at the end of the day has to be disposed of.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Ms. Bowen, how's it going?
It's going good. However, I do have no report today.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Scalette, academic standards and curriculum.
Yes, thank you. Following discussion at the November 18th committee meeting, the committee recommends approval of the proposal for new courses at the high school.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Questions or comments? I guess this can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Thank you. Second, following discussion at the November 18th committee meeting, the committee recommends approval of the proposed grading practice changes with the caveat that the board may choose to amend the changes in the future to incorporate an A+, which will be discussed at a future committee meeting.
We have a
So
motion.
moved.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Who are you
Second.
taking as the, okay, got it, no problem.
Was that a second? I'm sorry.
It was a second for me, John.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments?
This is Ellen. I'll support this, but I'm not sure that we haven't made a mountain out of a molehill out of this changing the grading system. And I think part of Dr. Ellis's presentation was the amount of technology staff time it was taking to keep some of these things up to date. And I had never heard that before. I wish we had heard that sooner. Maybe we did, and I've since forgotten about it. But I think we've made a mountain out of a molehill. But if this is what, if the students are willing to bear up under this, I'll vote for it.
Okay. Other questions or comments? I think this can also be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Okay, thank you. That completes my report.
Thank you. Nominations Committee, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Posnell. The minutes of the 7th December meeting are provided. Is there any need for comment on the elections that took place? They were uneventful. There was no call for a recount. Everything was smooth. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Keep going. Personnel.
Personnel, consent agenda. You have before you the personnel report, which includes retirement and employment. Would any board member like any of these items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of these items? If not, the chair moves approval of the below mentioned items.
I have a question regarding the employment of Amy Gardini. Is that someone replacing Kelsey?
No, she is just serving as a substitute. Well, yes and no. She's serving as a substitute, not a full replacement.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Can we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Then I think this can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
That concludes my report.
Have you got any good legislative updates for us?
Boy, do I ever. Well, as we all know, 2020 is coming to an end. I think we're all grateful for that. The hot action projected for 2021, no surprise here, we're all going to be following the money. In addition, charter reform, mandate relief, and getting to know new members of the legislature are all going to be hot items. If there are no questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Ms. Ferrari, LIU.
Yes. Before I start the Lincoln and report, I would just like to thank all those teachers whose retirements and personnel around the district whose retirements we have approved tonight. We thank them for their years of service and wish them nothing but the best and good health and, you know, happy travels when it becomes possible in the years ahead. Lincoln Intermediate report. There is no report from the LIU Joint Authority, except to say that the York Learning Center, for which we have responsibility, has been closed this week, once again because of the number of COVID cases with the LIU students, which dovetailing into the York Adams Academy has forced us to go virtual for the 2 days this week that the school is in session. once the building is closed down. 2 things to report from York Adams Academy. We're working on our budget for next year, and we will have that to the board for the January meeting. We still have some loose ends to tie up on that. And we were fortunate to be approached about receiving a $12,500 grant from the York Economic Alliance for COVID-19 expenses. So we filled that out, and hopefully that will come through and help us just like everybody else with all the added expenses of the COVID pandemic. And you have before you the brief report of the board meeting of the York Adams Academy of December 15th for your perusal. Thank you.
Thank you. York Adams Tax Bureau.
No report.
Thank you. York County School of Technology, Ms. Schrader.
I have no report.
Okay. I think we have links to the calendar still online, and I would like to thank everybody that joined us remotely for tonight. The board meeting schedule is online, and let's take an opportunity to see any final comments.
No further comments.
No additional public comments.
Okay, thank you. Well, in that case, if there's no additional items.
John, I have one. Are you getting our committee assignments out to us and all that
Yes.
stuff? Good stuff.
Yep. And because it didn't really change a lot, there won't be a lot of changes in there, but they will
That's
be
good.
coming out soon.
Thank you.
Okay. And with that, I think we can be adjourned. Thank you, everybody.